You might be doing your best to find some resources that can make things better for your marriage and for your blended family, but you're struggling to get your partner to join you.
Yeah, the other half of the partnership is dragging their feet.
Exactly. And that's what we want to talk about today.
Oh, we've been there.
How do we go about talking to our partner about getting help when it's kind of clear they don't really want to? Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your stepfamily from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of stepfamily life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Well, hello and welcome. We are always glad to be joining you.
Yes,
Thanks
we
for
are.
joining us here on the show. If you have an opportunity, I know we ask this every time, but it's so important in order to help reach others. And that's what we want to be able to do. And that is to leave a rating or a review. The more we get rated and reviewed over on Apple Podcasts, the more we're able to reach other couples just like you who probably need this kind of support as well. So would you do them a favor and would you just drop us a line in the review or even just hit a star rating? That's all you need to do. It'll take you less than 2 minutes and we would be so grateful. And we want to hear from you.
Yes.
We want to hear how this might be impacting you. So welcome. And today we're going to talk about a little bit of an interesting topic because we hear about this from multiple people that we connect with. And so we're hoping that's going to bring value. And we want to start with just asking the question, when it comes to marriage and family life, what is it we want? Usually I hear things like connection, peace in our home, right? Fun. I want to have fun with our family. I want to have fun with you as in our marriage and all that. And companionship, I think, is one that I don't necessarily hear that word a lot, but I hear it described a lot.
Or even partnership.
Yeah, partnership and companionship.
Yeah.
How can we have that? But there's sometimes roadblocks to getting there. There's all kinds of problems, as you know, big and small, that just seem to pile on. And often the problems that we face are ones we never expected when we were heading into this marriage and into these family relationships.
Yeah, we can get blindsided.
Totally. I think, even when we do have some realization early on that, hey, blended family life, it's maybe going to have some tough points. Like we can admit that even early on, but we quickly move past that and think, well, we're such a great team and we can overcome the odds and we won't be like everybody else.
We'll get through it.
Yeah.
We're so naive.
That's right. Then we find ourselves at odds over the big things like parenting and the little things, just household chores and all the stuff that goes into running a household,
respect,
right?
All of that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And often there comes this time when maybe one half of the partnership realizes, you know what, this is harder than we thought, and we need to go get some help because we're not getting along very well. We're not interacting very well. We're not treating each other very nicely.
Yeah.
And there's a certain amount of misery that we're feeling.
Yeah.
There's this realization that if something doesn't change, we're either headed toward a lifetime of misery together and we're just going to have to grin and bear it for the rest of our years, or worse yet, we're going to be headed toward another separation or divorce that our kids are going to have to go through.
Yeah.
And we really don't want that. So if you're listening to this on your own, it might be you.
Yeah.
You might be doing your best to find some resources that can make things better for your marriage and for your blended family, but you're struggling to get your partner to join you.
Yeah, the other half of the partnership is dragging their feet.
Exactly. And that's what we want to talk about today.
Oh, we've been there.
How do we go about talking to our partner about getting help when it's kind of clear they don't really want to? Right. And when you hit that point and you realize, like, I'm the one who wants to go get help, then there's this mission that comes to mind. Like, I've got to find a way to convince my spouse that it's time to go get some professional support. But you've probably noticed that they're not quite as eager as you to dive into this whole marriage coaching or counseling or therapy or anything like that.
Or not as eager as you were hoping they'd be.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe they're just not even that excited about small things like reading a book or listening to a podcast.
Yeah.
And that might be why
Simple
you're
stuff.
listening to this podcast by yourself right now. You know, they might be thinking, oh, everything's fine, right? That's what you hear. Oh, we're good.
Nothing
It's
needs
not
to
that big a
change.
deal,
Yeah.
right? Or we don't need all that psychobabble stuff. We can figure it out ourselves.
Yeah.
Those guys are crazy anyway. They all need shrinks,
Yeah.
right? We hear that a lot. Or, hey, we love each other, right? I mean, do you love me? Yes. Do you love me? Yes. Isn't that enough?
Yeah, what more do you need?
Yeah, exactly, right? But the truth is the same problems keep on circling back around.
Yeah.
Those same arguments every month or every week, sometimes every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And too many evenings go by without a true heart connection. And then you find yourselves hugging opposite sides of the bed, not being able to sleep because this just isn't what you signed up for.
Yeah.
You want a partner. You want to work together to resolve issues and manage problems as a united team. Like, you're ready to fight for your marriage, but for whatever reason, they just don't seem to be as interested in putting that effort in. So I want you to know we were there.
Mm-hmm.
We really struggled in this area.
Yeah.
We hit that point where we thought we were going to lose it. We were seriously considering separating.
Yeah. I remember thinking that if you came to me and said, that's it, I'm done, let's drop the papers, I would have been, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I was
Yeah,
ready.
you would have been on board for that.
I would have.
But what I came to you and said instead is we need to go get help.
Right.
And I remember you were not too keen on that idea.
No, I was not.
No, so it's funny, and I'm going to tell a little bit of a precursor part of this story.
Oh, no.
That,
I was afraid you were going to tell this story.
before we got married, you came to me and said, Mike, when we hit trouble, are you willing to go get help? I want to know that before
Yeah, that was
we
a
enter
deal
into
breaker
marriage.
for me, actually, if
you
you
wouldn't have
weren't
married
willing.
me.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then we hit this point 10 years in, and I'm like, hey, it's time to go get some help. And you're like, no way.
No, I was the one dragging my feet, that's
yeah.
for sure.
You were mad at me, and rightfully so.
Yes,
There was a lot of reasons you
I
were.
was hurting.
And so I'm wondering, in that moment when you are digging your heels in and going, no way, I am not getting help with you. What are some of the things that you might have been feeling and maybe was preventing you from going to get help? We're so excited to let you know about something brand new we've created just for you.
We've realized that with so many episodes available here on the show, it might feel a bit overwhelming to find the topics that matter most to you. That's why we've created a simple tool for you to receive a personalized playlist focused on your current struggle or your biggest challenge.
That's right. It's called the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz. You'll answer just a few questions, and based on your responses, we'll email you a curated custom playlist of episodes that are specific to you.
This simple quiz will direct you to the most impactful episodes that pertain to you personally and keep you on track in your journey of discovery, learning, and growth. So, scroll all the way to the bottom of the show notes for this episode and click the link to take the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz today.
Okay, let's get back to the discussion.
Well, there was definitely a lot of fear, right? What if we go? What if we put in the work? And I knew it was going to take some work and it doesn't help. What if nothing changes? Or
Right.
what if it even gets worse?
Yeah.
So I had some underlying fears there. I also had a fear of being controlled or fixed. And generally, you know, honey, that when you try to control me or fix me, I push back. That's just my natural reaction. And some people
I never
are
have
like
been able
that.
to fix you, quote unquote. You got me fixed after we had a couple kids. I don't know.
Another thing I was experiencing was just fatigue. I was tired. I was emotionally drained.
Yeah.
And I just felt like I don't have the time or energy to be intentional or to try something new. I would rather just wing it and hope it all works out somehow.
Yeah.
I kind of was hoping for this miracle, I guess, or I was just exhausted.
Yeah. So there was fear, there was fatigue. What else?
Probably some finger pointing, if I'm honest, looking at the things that you needed to change.
Right.
And feeling like this was your problem, not necessarily my problem. And on top of all of that, I have a tendency to avoid problems.
Yeah.
I just kind of like to, again, pretend that it's all going to work out. And unfortunately, avoidance doesn't solve problems, but I have had to learn that the hard way.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of reasons that a partner might not want to go get help. And when they're in those kind of mindsets, being afraid, avoidance, right? Finger pointing, hey, this is your problem. You go get fixed.
Yeah.
When they're in that kind of mindset, it's just tough to try and get them to open up to the possibility that some extra support might actually make a difference for us.
Yeah, I was pretty shut down.
Yeah, you were closed at the time. And there were some reasons that were your responsibility and there were some reasons that were my responsibility, that things that I did to you that caused that problem. And we had to work back toward some partnership and that kind of thing. And so we want to talk through how do you go about that today? And the truth is that your partner is likely not always in one of those mind frames. The chances are that underneath the emotion of it all, that fear, that fatigue, the avoidance, the finger pointing, the conflict, right? Underneath all of that, they probably have some inclination that things just aren't right and they aren't quite sure how to turn it around.
Yeah, I definitely knew that things weren't okay.
Yeah. Now, if that's true, then how and when do you go about talking to them about getting help? Like, what can you do to find those times when they might be a little bit more open to this discussion than other times? And that's what we want to offer today. 5 tips for talking to your partner about getting help. Now, before we dive into that, let's talk about some times that you don't want to bring this up, okay? So before we talk about what to do, let's talk about what not to do.
Very important.
Because knowing when to keep your thoughts to yourself is just as important, maybe even more important as when you actually do need to have the conversation.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
What's one time we don't want to have this conversation?
Well, you definitely don't want to start this type of conversation in the heat of the battle, right? If you're in the middle of conflict and you say something like, we need to get some serious help, or you need to get some serious help. That is not going to help your cause at all. Yeah,
I would agree with that. I would add to that, don't do this in front of the kids either.
Yeah.
Right? In a blended family, most of the time, it's, their kids or your kids, and you don't want to be in front of either, because confronting the fact that we aren't able to figure this out on our own right now can be a really personal matter. And it's really just between the two of you, not between either set of kids. And keep in mind, in a blended family, that kids are going to side with a bio parent most of the time, and that can create more division. Yeah. So you need to keep it just between the two of you. That also means not in front of friends or extended family members, so that embarrassing argument that breaks out when you're over at the in-laws, it's just not the best time to talk about this, right?
No. Also, when you're tired or when you're hungry, we're not at our best at those times, if you've noticed. So wait until you're both well rested and you've had some food and you're feeling good and all of your needs are taken care of. That's so good. That's so practical too. Like we forget that, I'm irritable when I'm hungry. Yeah. It's not a time to have a serious discussion. Yeah. Right? Or at 11 o'clock at night. Yeah, exactly. The worst time of the day for that other person. Right. So I'm a morning person. I'd happily dive into tough conversations at 6:30, 7:30 in the morning. Yeah. And in fact, I might actually even want to talk about serious stuff early in the morning, but that would be a disaster for Kim. I'm not having any of that. There's no way she's going to engage at that.
So what we've got to do is think about some strategic times of the day when we actually both might be at our best.
Exactly.
Not just when I'm at my best.
Right.
Yeah.
So those are the times when you don't want to initiate a conversation around this. So let's shift our focus now and dive into those 5 tips for inviting your spouse to get some help with you. Now, the first thing you want to do is create a little bit of what you do want. So find a way to create some connection and some fun as a couple.
Even just a little bit.
Yeah, maybe plan a special date night or cuddle and watch a movie together, maybe a lighthearted comedy where you laugh together. Laughing together is so good. Or play a fun game, something you both enjoy and a way for you to really connect. And this is going to give you an opportunity to express how much you love them and how you want more of this kind of time with them.
Right.
You really enjoy this and you would like to extend that more often. And so that'll help to put you and your partner in a more open and relaxed mind frame.
Right.
It's a more positive approach.
Yeah. And it kind of takes us to the next step. So we're creating a little bit more of what we want, that connection time intentionally.
Yep.
And that leaves the door open to what I would call ask, don't tell.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because we've just had this good time. We're laughing. We're a little bit connected, even if it's just on a surface level. And then when you've had that moment of connection, it can be really great to share something like, I'm having such a great time with you right now. I want you to know that I love you and I'm committed to you and I'm really hopeful for our future. Now, you've just affirmed how great a time you're having together, and more than likely your partner's having it too. You can sense if they are, if they're relaxed and they're enjoying. And then it's really easy to transition to just asking a question. Like I said, ask, don't tell, and have it be forward focused. So focus on the future. So after you've said, hey, this is such a great time. I love you. I'm enjoying connecting with you. You might say something like, I've been thinking a lot about our future, and I'm wondering what it is that you want for us.
Yeah.
And so now you're just inviting them to describe what they want for your future.
And to share.
And at that time, you only need to do 3 things. 1, you need to listen. Right? Now, that's why it's ask, don't tell, because now you're using your ears and not your mouth.
And really hear.
Listen to what they're saying. Affirm what they're saying. And you don't have to agree with what they're saying in order to affirm.
That's right.
Affirm might sound like, thanks so much for sharing that with me. I'm really glad to know that's important to you.
Or I understand why you're feeling that way.
Exactly. That makes a lot of sense to me. You don't have to agree with it to understand it.
Right.
And all through that, being kind and gentle, using very few words. Now, if you're feeling really anxious about your situation and you want to get some help, it can be tempting to use a lot of words. You might slip into that mode where you're going to try to convince them that, hey, if we want more of this, then we've got to go get help. But at this time, you need to just stay focused in a curiosity mindset. Use a few words, as few words as possible, and just focus on genuinely listening to them.
Yeah, don't go into lecture mode.
No. Instead, like I said, listen and affirm, hey, thanks for sharing that with me. And then instead of making statements, you might challenge yourself to just ask some follow-up questions. Something like, if our relationship was really great in your eyes, what would that look like? What would we be doing differently? What might you want more of? Right? Those are all questions just to think about the future and where we're headed, not where we're stuck right now. So we're creating this moment of connection, and then we're entering into the conversation by asking, not telling, asking what they want, not telling what you want. Right?
Because asking is attracting. Telling is repelling.
That's right.
Remember that. And I love those last 3 questions because they're open-ended questions.
Yes.
They can't come back with a yes, no. They have to actually search their own heart and give you some words as to how to answer your question. So I love those.
Now, what's next?
Well, the next thing we want to do is detect, don't defend.
Very good.
There's a big difference there. So as you're asking these questions, be prepared for a negative or even a hurtful response.
Yeah, that could come. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you've been experiencing a lot of conflict and there's been some hurt feelings, you might get that. You might hear something like, well, it would be great if you would stop nagging me about every little thing and creating all these fights between us.
Yeah.
You could hear something
You
like
really
that
could,
if
yeah.
things have been tough. But do your best to keep in mind that they are likely reacting out of their own pain. Your job is to try and detect what is going on under the surface rather than jumping to defense mode to try and protect yourself.
That's right.
It's tempting to jump into defense mode when your partner is pointing the finger at you.
Right.
But you want to keep the big goal in mind here. And this is not a time to figure out who's to blame for all the challenges. It's to try and get on the same page around reaching out for some help and some support.
Totally.
So your job is to detect those hidden needs that are likely underneath the accusational comments.
Yeah.
Try to understand where they're coming from. Now, in this case, if they respond like I just said, they're likely really expressing that they're tired of the fighting, right? That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Just like you are. You're tired of the fighting too in the conflict. You want more peace. So at that point, your job is to simply identify or affirm what they're sharing, what you're hearing them say. So something like, I hear you saying that you're tired of all this fighting. I know I'm really tired of it too.
Oh man, that is so good. It's so much better than, what do you mean me causing all the fighting, right? Because guess what? Now our connection just got lost and now we're actually headed for another fight.
Instead you're looking for some common ground here. You're both tired of the fighting. It doesn't really matter who's to blame at this point. You just want to get on some common ground and connection. That's really your goal. Then you can keep the conversation going by asking something like, if we were to resolve some of these issues and if we weren't fighting all the time, how do you think that would impact our relationship?
Now you've just neutralized it and now you're talking back about the future again.
Yeah.
Like, okay, if we were able to actually do that, what would that look like for us? How would that feel?
Yeah, and you're staying calm and you're talking calmly and respectfully. Now you've detected a common frustration. Both of you want to end the conflict. And you're starting to detect what could be for your relationship, and your partner is starting to detect what they want as well, which is really great. So in this step, detect, don't defend, you want to listen, and then reflect back what you're hearing them share.
I hear you saying, and not from a defensive standpoint, but from that common ground. I hear you saying you don't want to fight a lot anymore. I don't want that either.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. All right. What's the next step, honey?
All right. So once we've started really detecting what we want, now it might be a good time to start building a bridge. And we're going to build a bridge from describing what we don't want, right? We don't want all that fighting, to imagining what could be those things that you really do want.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So that's coming right on the tail end of what we just talked about. After you've done a lot of listening and reflecting back what you're hearing, you might express some agreement by saying something like, you know what? All this sounds really good to me. And I want that too, right?
Yeah.
After they've said, well, what would that, it might look different if we weren't fighting anymore. And then you can ask the bridge building question. I'm wondering, what do you think is keeping our relationship from experiencing less conflict and more connection and just enjoying each other more? So now you're talking about those roadblocks, but you're trying to build a bridge over the obstacle. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you've got to be brave sometimes to ask this particular question because their perspective could be very different from yours. We want to focus on listening non-defensively. I know we just said detect, don't defend, and we're going to stay non-defensive all the way throughout this whole process. And we want to keep on reflecting back with empathy. Even if their answer to this question of, what do you think is keeping us from that? Even if they say, well, you are,
Oh,
right?
no.
Which is hard to deal
Yeah.
with, but we're going to have to try and keep ourselves calm and saying something like, I hear that you're frustrated with the way I respond to some of our issues. And honestly, I want things to be different too. Pulling it back always to, gee, I hear you're frustrated with that interaction, but I want things to be
Yeah,
different.
back to the common
Back
ground.
to the common ground. I want to have a better marriage with you as
I
well.
want to learn.
That's right. Now, it might be time to share what you see on the other side of the bridge. Okay. So you might say something like, honey, I want to understand you more and have you know more about me too. I want us to have fewer fights. I want to have more connection. I want to have more fun, maybe even more sex along the way. Does that sound like something that you want as well? Right? Now we've just built a bridge from where we're stuck over to where we want to get to.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah. Okay.
All right. So the next thing you want to do when you get to this point, which you've already made some great progress,
That's right.
is you want to now explore the possibilities. So now you can consider the possibilities together.
As a team.
Right. So you want to ask the question, how do you think we can get there? So you've painted the vision of the future on the other side of the bridge.
Yep.
But now how do we get there together?
Right.
And your goal is to simply take the next step that you can both get behind. And this is your opportunity to simply brainstorm all the different options.
Right.
Now, something to keep in mind when you have this conversation is that you may have been thinking about finding resources, support, or professional help for a while. But that doesn't mean that your spouse has been there, right? They maybe haven't been thinking about this much at
Sure.
all.
Yeah, just because you've been thinking about it doesn't mean they've been thinking about
Yeah.
it. And honestly, they might be several emotional steps behind you right now. And a good next step from their perspective
Yeah.
might be a really small, simple step, even though you're like light years ahead.
Yeah,
And
like
so you're trying to meet them where they are. What are some small, simple
exactly.
steps?
Reading a book together about
Yeah.
step family dynamics or listening to a few podcast episodes together. Joining an online course for parenting or blended family life.
Yep.
Or maybe they're ready to be introduced to possibilities for coaching or counseling, but they're not quite ready to actually start meeting regularly.
Yeah, maybe
they're
they
ready
just
to
want to do
explore.
a consult or something.
Yeah. So in this stage of the process, there are no wrong or right answers. Don't come in with an agenda. You're just exploring all the different possibilities. So make sure you are as positive as possible with each idea that your partner might suggest. Okay. Don't shoot them down.
So even if they say something you really don't like, you don't want to say, well, that's a dumb idea.
No,
right?
no.
What would you say instead?
You want to stay positive. Say something like, yeah, I can see how that's a possibility. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, there you go. Really, you don't have to agree with it. Just say thanks for sharing that.
Just affirm every idea and just be thankful they're engaging in this process.
yes, very
Again,
much so.
let your own agenda go and just have this kind of unfold naturally.
Yeah, I like it.
Now, during the brainstorming process, we recommend 3 things to focus on. First, make it your goal to come up with a minimum of 6 ideas.
I love this
Yeah,
strategy.
and this is something we teach couples when we coach them one-on-one when it comes to problem solving. Getting to those 6 ideas helps those creative juices to start flowing, and it opens up a lot of new possibilities for both of you as a couple.
Totally.
Now, second, use the question, what else might we do?
Oh, yeah. That's a
Keep
great coaching
digging.
question. What
Yeah,
else?
yeah.
What else? What else?
You don't necessarily have to say, okay, we've come up with 6 ideas. But once you ask the initial question of, how do you think we can get there? After they offer their first idea, simply respond with, yeah, I can see how that would help. What else might we do?
Yep. What else?
Keep digging.
It's good.
And finally, ask permission before sharing your ideas. Be patient.
Yep.
If you have asked that question, what else? Over and over, you can see that maybe they're starting to get stuck. They can't think of anything else. Then you can ask something like, do you mind if I share an idea?
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important. I know that when we talk to couples, you share all the time that when I began asking permission in our marriage for all kinds of things, to share all kinds of things, it was so much better for you. And it's because when you ask someone permission to share something with them, because they actually are responding to your request for permission, what's happening is this tiny little switch in their brain gets flipped. And it actually helps them to listen better and receive more.
Yeah.
So asking permission can be really powerful.
Yeah. For me, I feel less controlled.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a little bit more sense of control over where the conversation is going. And of course, I'm always going to say, yeah, share. I'm never going to shut you down. But yeah, there's something about asking permission.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So let's recap for a moment before we move on. So you've created that moment of connection.
Yeah.
So a little bit more of what you want for your future.
Yeah.
Then you've asked your spouse to share a bit about what they want for your future, as opposed to telling them what you want for the future. So you're asking, not telling. Then you've stayed in listening mode, and you're detecting, not defending. And you're detecting what's underneath any of those negative comments that might have been made. You're staying away from getting defensive.
Yes.
Then you started the bridge building from anything that came up that you don't want for your relationship over to the vision of what you do want for your relationship. And now you've been exploring a variety of possible ways to pursue that vision.
Yeah. How do we get there together?
Yeah. Now it's time to invite them to take the next best step. This is just a simple question of reviewing those 6 or more ideas that you've just been talking about and asking the question, hey, if we were to take a next step, which one of these ideas do you think we should start with? So we're not committing to all of this. It's not years of therapy.
Yeah, we're not getting overwhelmed.
It's just, what's the starting point?
Yeah.
Now, maybe they're just going to pick a simple one, and it might be a great starting point, even if it's a small step.
Sure.
They may have some idea about combining 2 of the ideas that you came up with. That'd be great as well.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, if you've been kind of having a hard time getting your spouse to invest time or energy into making things better in your marriage, we recommend that you just simply go with what they're willing to do initially.
Sure.
It's just the next step. It's not the only step. And just a little tip on this, that save your other ideas that you wrote down, all those brainstorming ideas that you wrote when you were exploring. And once you've accomplished this first step, then you can pull that list out and just remind them, hey, you know, I was thinking about that list of stuff we made a while ago, and I'm really grateful for the progress we've made already. I'm wondering if you think that we might be ready to take a next step.
Sure.
And then you can look at all those different ideas, and you might identify what step you would take after the first one.
Yeah.
It's about progress, right?
Exactly. And if your spouse engages with you in all of this and agrees to take a next step, even if it's the smallest next step on your brainstorming list, celebrate that as a win. And remember that you're really after progress here, not an instant leap to coaching or counseling, and certainly not an instant transformation of your marriage. This is going to take time.
So you're saying don't get all upset of, oh, you just picked that one because it was the easy one.
No, don't get upset.
That's right. Celebrate.
Exactly. A simple next step is progress towards your goal. So keep that in mind. It's a win when you're able to take a next step together.
Okay. But what if this doesn't go very well? Like, what if they don't want to engage, or if they just plain old say no to taking a next step?
Yeah. Well, first be emotionally prepared for that. It's a possibility. Remember that your goal in having this conversation is to create some genuine connection and not to manipulate or trick them into getting help with you. If they're not ready yet, then you may have to accept that for now and be, really patient with the process. You may decide to wait a few weeks or even a few months and then try this process again to see if they might be ready at that point.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, it brings us to our final thought on trying to have this conversation about going to get help. Our first discussion with every coaching client is reminding them that each individual needs to do their work when it comes to making progress in their marriage and in their family life.
Right.
So here's the thing. Your job as an individual within the context of your relationship is not about fixing your partner. It's simply to work on you.
Yes.
In fact, I would say that most of the work you and I did, honey, that was done over the years really has been our individual work, our individual healing.
And growth.
That's right. And even though we were teetering on the brink of divorce back 10 years ago, and we spent a number of months really working through those issues and trying to hold it together, I think we could just about count on one hand the number of times we actually met with a counselor together. Most of our work was done independently, individually. That's right. And, that might not be true for every couple or even the right approach for every couple. But what is true is that when it comes to getting support and help, the first place to focus is on you, not fixing them, but on your own personal growth and healing.
Absolutely.
So if you run into lots of resistance or even a direct no, I don't want to read that book, I don't want to listen to the podcast, I certainly don't want to go to counseling or coaching, I want to encourage you to have the courage to consider going first. This was really powerful in our story.
Definitely.
We shared a story at the beginning of this podcast that, when we reached that difficult point in our marriage, I wanted to go get help. Kim didn't want to get help. I could have easily said, well, too bad. That's that. She doesn't want to get help. I guess we're off. And we hear that story over and over of, well, what can I do if my partner doesn't want to go get help? Let me tell you, we're living proof that you can do a lot of things, even when your partner doesn't get help. If you get the stiff arm, then have the courage to go get started. What happened in our story, honey, when I went and chose to go start getting counseling and working on myself at that point in history?
Well, it was definitely a turning point for us. Even though I refused to get help, your going and getting help and working through issues changed how you showed up in our relationship.
Yeah.
And I noticed that. I mean, it was very evident. And when I noticed that you were handling similar scenarios, similar situations that we'd had in the past, when I noticed you were handling those different, I mean, you were more gentle, you were more open, you were more receptive, you were a better listener. There were all kinds of changes that took place as a result of you getting your own individual help that impacted how we did family life and our issues. And I started going, something's different here. And you know what? I think I want some of that.
I want some of that. Yeah, totally.
It really did change my mind.
Yeah. So if you're feeling stuck, have the courage to give it a shot and do some stuff first. Focus on what's happening inside of you and focus your work on healing your hurts as well as committing to learning how you're going to show up better in your relationship and for your family.
So worth it.
Yeah. In our story, I just started showing up better. Like Kim just said, I started treating her differently and responding to those typical situations in a new way that actually honored her and loved her and our kids.
Yeah.
And like she just shared, when she saw that change start in me, it was just the motivation she needed to start moving forward herself.
I saw that there was hope.
Now, this whole idea of going first, it's not like a magic pill that's going to all of a sudden create that same motivation in your spouse that we just described for Kim. But if you're genuinely growing and healing yourself, isn't that better than doing nothing at all? You're just sitting around hoping that something is somehow going to change when you don't do anything. But I think we've heard that that's the definition of an insanity, right?
Right.
Doing the same things over and over and expecting a different result.
Right.
Do something different. Go get help yourself if that's what you need to do.
Yeah. And here's the thing. What we've shared today isn't the only thing you can do. In fact, we've recently discovered a new way to look at motivation in your marriage.
Yeah.
And we're really excited next week to be interviewing our friends, Matt and Maria. And we're going to be talking about Matt's recent book and all of their discoveries about motivation catalysts and how it might work in the context of moving forward in your marriage. It's a really cool concept. And They're a fun and dynamic couple, and we're sure that you're going to get some great insight around motivating, not manipulating, but motivating your partner, which might help you both reach the future that you really want.
Yeah, so make sure you hang out with us next week when we talk with them. That's going to be a lot of fun. I hope this was helpful. Maybe you need to go back through and re-listen to this episode and take some notes and write the process down.
That would be a good idea.
And then start planning how you're going to talk to your spouse, not in the heat of battle, but with a real intentional process to try and draw them out and find out what it is that they want and those foundational pieces that you want together.
And build that bridge.
Build that bridge. That's right. All right. Well, we hope this brings you value, and that's going to make this episode a wrap.
Until next time.